Hey everybody, Matty Ice here, and in today's video I'm going to cover a Warlock Strand build that's really great at ad clear and some neutral game. In high-end content, this is also a pretty effective tool. As long as you're able to kill ads, which you should be able to do, you'll be able to do great crowd control and you'll be able to really support your team and be able to have some great solo play as well. So if you haven't noticed from the background gameplay, this build is focusing on Osteo Striga and Necrotic grips. Now, the reason you want to combine these two together, you could also use Thorn if you wanted to, but the poison interaction between Osteo Striga is amplified by the Necrotic grips and helps to spread that poison around. You can use this build with any weapon, but it's most effective with this gun just because of the interaction between these two exotics. Realistically, you can use this build with any exotic combination you want. Osteo Striga and Necrotic grips is just a great combination that really helps to amplify the damage output and really make sure you can get those kills as quickly as possible. But any kills will do, so I recommend using this, but you also want to have a strand weapon as a backup, and I'll show you why later in the video. So as you can see from the background gameplay, everything is being suspended, everything's being poisoned and dying, and this is on legend difficulty where you're forced 15 under. After I cover the build, the mods and everything else, I will show a master lost sector that I did, and you can see just how effective the build is there as well. So before we get into the aspects, fragments, mods, and all of that, I do want to just go over some weapons that would work really well for this besides Osteo Striga Thorn. Commemoration's great. Any kind of machine gun is really nice. I just prefer Commemoration because it's got that reconstruction on it. Thunderlord would also be nice. I think it would probably do pretty well, especially with the big buff it's gotten recently. Any kind of auto rifle would be nice, something with some range. That's my main concern with Osteo, is just its lack of range. And then trace rifles are actually not too bad to use with it either. Trace rifles got a pretty big buff recently, and they're actually somewhat effective now. You could use a glaive if you wanted to, because the Necrotic grips interaction with glaives. But other exotics you can use with this build would just be really any Warlock exotic that focuses on ability regen, such as Nazrak's Sin, any kind of health regeneration, such as Karnstein Armament. Winter's Guile got a kind of a nerf with the glaive, but it's still not bad if you wanted to pair it with the glaive. You could obviously do this with the Swarmer boots if you wanted to keep the Threadling build going. Those Threadlings you get off your Rift will still unravel targets, and that can still be pretty nice. So you got a lot of options going on here. One last thing I want to talk about real quick before we get into the actual details of the build. Demolitionist works really well with this build because you're going to be eating your grenade, and eating your grenade actually does proc Demolitionist, and it's just a great way to keep you from having to reload and keeps that damage uptime. So if you have, in my example, a heavy machine gun with Demolitionist or an auto rifle with Demolitionist, it really is a great pairing for this build. So now let's actually get into the aspects and fragments of this build, and you can see how it's going to shape together. Alright, so starting off with the helmet, I'm going with one kinetic siphon to generate orbs based off of my Osteo kills. Depending on what weapon you want to main, I highly recommend just putting that siphon on because orbs of power are just great and they're how you activate a lot of the armor abilities. I'm going with the Powerful Friends just to kind of round out the helmet. I was at 9 out of 10 energy, this kind of just put it at 10 out of 10, and it just kind of helps your teammates. Hands-on is actually something that I was testing out. It doesn't seem to be as effective as I would have liked it to be, but it's still the best way to help get extra super energy for your helmet. If you want to put a Finder mod on, that's also just as good. But hands-on, the reason I went with this is because tangled explosions actually count as powered melee kills. So if you're shooting those tangles with your strand weapon, especially this season, that'll help you get more of that super energy back. On the gloves, I went with 2 impact inductions and a heavy-handed. Again, your powered melee final blows make those orbs of power. It doesn't count for the suspension, but again, the tangle explosions, if you shoot the tangles, should generate the orb of power, and it'll also get you some of that impact induction back to your grenade cooldown. And again, that just kind of synergizes, and you might happen to get a powered melee kill just naturally. So again, that's just what I'm going for the arms. On the chest, it's kind of up to you depending on the activity you're running, but I just put one of each resistance on there. Again, it just depends on the activity. Sometimes I do double solar, 1 void, sometimes I just, mix it up. On the boots, I actually prefer to go with Better Already and Recuperation for the survivability. You're going to be generating a ton of orbs, So anytime you need health, just go pick up an orb. You'll get that instant health refresh, and then also you'll start to regen your health. So you want to like at least do one of these, if not both. And then I'm going with a kinetic weapon surge. Again, you're going to want to pair this with whatever you have on your helmet for the siphon, whatever your primary weapon you're going to be using for this is. Osteo is a kinetic weapon, so that's why I have this on there. And finally on the bond, I've got double bomber and a time dilation. Time dilation is just to keep the uptime of kinetic surge going, and the bomber, you're going to be using your class ability pretty frequently to get your grenade back, and you're going to just want to keep that cycle going. That's your typical Warlock cycle. Going into the artifact this season, I've got the authorized mods just to make those mods cheaper. That's kind of a big one here that lets you put all that in. An untangler, destroying a tangle with the strand weapon, suspends targets. So this is going to give you that extra suspend, which is why I recommend doing a strand weapon in addition to your Osteo if you're doing Osteo. I'm going with the strand machine gun most of the time, but I've also done a strand auto rifle. Volatile flow, never a bad choice. Again, if you want to go with a commemoration or some other void weapon, volatile flow is just perfect. Again, orbs of power should be everywhere with this build. Counter weave is going to help you get some of your energy back since you're going to be on a strand subclass. It's an easy way to get some ability back. Bricks from Beyond, again, void weapons are great. It's a great pairing with volatile flow. There's no reason not to get this one. Threaded Blast, again, no reason not to get this one, especially if you're running Untangler. They go great together because it just makes that explosion bigger and does more damage. And then finally I went with Prismatic Transfer. This one's a bit of a flex slot, but in general I recommend doing this one just as a overall artifact mod. Alright, so now let's get into the aspects and fragments here. The main thing you want to go with is your Shackle Grenade, because this is what's going to give you that suspension. You can throw it and it'll suspend targets in an area, but the main reason we're doing this is because of Mindspun Invocation. You're going to consume that grenade, and it's going to give you 25 seconds of Weaver's Trance, where your final blows will suspend targets in a nearby detonation. It's basically the same radius as you would get from your artifact shooting the strand tangle with a strand weapon, but this is just going to be on any final blow kill. Again, 25 seconds, it's a long time, should be enough time for you to get your grenade back, especially with the fragments we're running. So the first fragment here is we're going to go with Continuity. You're doing this one because you want the suspend and unravel effects to just have increased duration. It also gives you some extra strength, which is nice. Thread of Generation. If you're running a strand build on Warlock, or really any class, there's no reason not to have Thread of Generation in there. You're losing 10 discipline, but you're able to generate grenade energy just by doing damage. Not kills, damage. So this is just an all-around great fragment to have. Thread of Warding. Again, we're going to be generating a ton of orbs of power. Woven Mail has great damage resistance, well worth the -10 resilience penalty here. You should be able to have this on pretty much all the time. And then finally we're going to go Thread of Mind. Defeating a suspended target gives you your class ability energy. Again, this kind of helps that cycle of Rift into Bomber, into Grenade, into Rift, into Bomber, into Grenade. It's just a great cycle that's going on here. Before we head into the Master Lost sector at the end of the video, I would just like to say that if you found this helpful, I would greatly appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel. It really does help me out. And thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.